let's talk for the next hour about conducting some civil campaigns. All right. So we are in that campaign silly season, as we call it in this country, where it's about people coming, making promises, people coming and also trying to woo people to their side, others trying to force people to their side, and others trying to incite people so that you can be influenced to join their side. World Civility Ambassador, that's how he's been described. He's also the coordinator of a campaign called the Civility for Kenya campaign. Dr. Ruben West joins us in the studio. Dr. West, welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So let's first of all understand who's Dr. Ruben West.
Sure. I'm from the United States. I live in around Chicago area. I'm originally from the Kansas area. I'm a World Civility Ambassador. In 2019, I was also appointed Universal Peace Ambassador. I Changed Nations dubbed me in 2019 as the USA Civility Icon. Mm-hmm. And so, even when I got all of these titles, I kind of wondered, what did all these titles mean? What did they mean? And, sometimes you have a calling for something and sometimes something calls you. And I realized that it's not what I was called, but really what I was called to do. And that is this civility work. I started working with World Civility Ambassador and World Civility Leader Dr. Clyde Rivers out of Victorville, California, through an organization called I Changed Nations. And they teach diplomacy, they teach civility work. And as I got a chance to travel with them to different countries, Guyana, Burundi, Uganda, I realized that there was a calling for me to do this work. And so I'm excited to be here and participate in these activities.
Let's take some steps back.
Yes, sir.
All right. So who was Dr. West before you became all these things that you are now?
Sure. So I worked in surgery for 29 years. I have a martial arts school. Next year will be my 25th year in the martial arts. I didn't teach it because I wanted to be a professional fighter.
Martial arts is like what?
Karate, judo, yeah.
Right.
I did it because I always had a passion for impacting people, and specifically youth. And if you don't give them something that they like, you can't influence them. So I realized martial arts would give me the avenue to bring them in, get them involved with something, but at the same time, infuse certain principles that I felt would be able to guide their life. So this is the 25th year coming up next year. It will be our 25th anniversary of my martial arts school. It's one of the things I'm passionate about and I love to do. But I'm a father. I have 3 children. My 2 oldest children have already graduated college, and my daughter's a nurse, ICU nurse. My son works for Pepsi Company. He's in the leadership management team there. And then my youngest son, Robinson, he turns 10 next week. He turns 10 on the 9th of November, so a little bit more than a week. And so I brought him to Kenya several times. I had an event here in Nairobi in 2019. He was 7 at the time. He was one of the speakers. And then I had one in July of this year, and he came back again and spoke again. And the reason I did that was to acclimate him, to get him used to being in front of the crowd, to get him used to sharing his thoughts and his voice. And here's the funny thing. Every day when I'm there and I wake my son up, I do it like this. I'll get in his ear and I'll say, "You're full of greatness and possibility. You're full of greatness and possibility. You're full of greatness and possibility." That's how I wake him up. And then I'll have him stand in front of the mirror and say, "I'm full of greatness and possibility." Now it's not me saying it to him, it's him saying it to himself. And the reason I do that is because most of the time we focus on behavior. Make a child do this, make them do this. I don't necessarily focus on behavior. I focus on belief because belief creates behavior. They asked me, "Dr. West, would you come to Chicago and talk to the young men about pulling their pants up? Because they're sagging." That's what we call it in the U.S. They're sagging. And I said, no, I won't come and talk to them about pulling their pants up. But I will come and talk to them about pulling their dreams up. And when they pull their dreams up, their pants will come up automatically because their dress is a reflection of their dreams. So I've always been passionate about inspiring the youth, taking people to the next level, working with individuals and organizations. I also did corporate training and things like that.
Diplomacy I've heard of, civility not so much.
Exactly.
What is civility?
Civility is the gateway to peace. So civility is a way of treatment. It's treating people the way you want to be treated. It's not doing something to others that you would find hurtful if done to you. And so many times we talk about peace. I was just at an event that was sponsored by the NCIC, I think it is the National Cohesion and Integration Commission, but it was for all of the religious leaders. So there was religious leaders from all the backgrounds, and they were all there, and they were excited to be there, and they were talking about peace. How can we maintain peace during the campaign season? And I listened, and here's what I want to tell everybody, that peace is an end result. See, peace is a destination, but civility is the transportation to get to peace. Because what incites people is in civil treatment. When they talk in civil ways about their opponent, when they try and ignite people and excite people to take violent action or weaponize them, that's incivility. And so when we're saying we want peace, understand that peace is the end result of treating people in a civil way.
If you were to go back, say, for instance, into the work you've been doing in your neck of the woods, tell us about some success stories, situations where you brought in the civility narrative, the civility work, what the situation was like, and after a period of time, whatever period that was, what became of them, and what success in civility actually looks like.
Fantastic. So I can talk about the organization as a whole, but I really want to talk about my experience. If you remember in the U.S., and not that you have to, but there was an incident where in Minnesota, a young man was killed, George Floyd, because a police officer kneeled on his neck. The police officer was subsequently found guilty of some criminal charges and was sentenced to, I think, 20 plus years. But what that did is that sparked violence around the world, and really violence in our country. And the reason is there was a few law enforcement officers that act in an civil way, and then what happens is the people judge the whole law enforcement community. Now, at the same time, there was a few protesters that acted in an civil way, and the people judged the whole protest in a certain way. And it wasn't all the law enforcement, and it wasn't all the protesters. But in my local area in Bloomington, Illinois, where I live, they had some marches, some protests, people exercising their right to be out. And so I decided to go participate. And the reason I wanted to participate is because you always have agitators in the crowd. The agitators are designed to get people to do something temporarily foolish that has a permanent consequence. And so that not only happens there, it happens everywhere. And that's why I want people to be careful when people are trying to incite them to go do something, because you could go do it, but you can suffer the consequence and they don't. And so what I wanted to do was be a part of the conversation. I wanted to be a part of the marches. I wanted to be a part of the community when they talked about these issues. And so I signed up to do that. I participated in the marches. Because I talked about, here's what we should be saying, here's the narrative we should be bringing, let's attack the problem, not the person. So even in politics, what happens a lot of times is civility is attacking the problem because we have to deal with the problems. Incivility is attacking the person. Now it's a personal attack. See, there's a difference between disrespect and disgrace, right? We disrespect somebody, they disgrace themselves. If you do bad acts, there's nothing I can do for you. The truth speaks for itself. But if I disrespect you, that doesn't look on you, that looks on me. People start to look, why does he talk like that? Why does he act like that? And unfortunately, when we have different debates and things like that and the politicians come together, when they don't use civility, but they rather focus on incivility, we end up talking about their behavior and not their policies. We talk about how they put this person down or what they said, but we're not talking about the policies. So what I wanted to do was keep everybody focused on the narrative, which was civil treatment, the narrative, which was giving people opportunity to share their voice. And the narrative I wanted to bring was the ability to listen. Churchill said it takes courage to stand up and speak, but it also takes courage to sit down and listen. And so a lot of times when we get into these situations where people are ignited or excited, everybody wants to talk, nobody wants to listen. So I wanted to encourage the listening. I wanted to encourage everybody participating in the conversation, but I wanted to encourage them to do it civilly. We were successful in that when we did the marches, when we did the rallies. There was a couple of incidents that broke out during the march, and fortunately I was right there and could diffuse that situation and keep us moving in the right direction. I think there was a police window that got broke out, but here's the good news. Nobody was hurt. Nobody was injured. All the narratives went off without a hitch, and we really got past the issue. And what was the real issue? Interesting enough, the issue wasn't our city's issue. We didn't have a problem in our city, but because it spilled over and because the attitude reflects leadership, when you have the leaders speaking in a certain way, it ignites and incites the people in a certain way. And so I had to work and say, hey, really, this is not our issue. We don't have this big divisive issue. And what happened there seems to be an isolated incident, but because it gets so much publicity, it seems like it's the way it is. So I had people from around the world where I've traveled call me, Dr. West, are you safe? I mean, we see there's riots all over the U.S. Yeah, that wasn't true. It wasn't riots all over the U.S., but the media made it look like it was. It was just in a few isolated areas, and I let them know I was safe.
The when you talk about the consequences of civility, as you put it, yes, it makes sense. But against the backdrop of a history of discrimination, systemic discrimination against people of color, specifically in the country that you come from, how then do you teach people to actually be civil and to respond to something which is not historical, but current?
I think you teach them by integrating them. See, one of the things that we had to do was bring the conversation to the communities. Most of the time, people were speaking from a perspective that they've never experienced for themselves. Watch this. These people are this way. This community is this way. The police are this way. Have you had a run-in with them? No, but I know.
No, but yeah.
Have you met these people? No, but I know. So they're not really having an authentic relationship with their conversation. It's from someone else's knowledge or something they saw on TV or something they heard. And so what you do is you get them to sit down and understand that there's more that we have in common than we have different. And they have to understand that there are people who benefit from us not connecting. There's people who benefit from us not coming together. And so here's what happens in a political movement when that happens. Politicians win, but the people lose. You see, they win the election, but now we don't like our neighbor. We don't like the neighboring tribe because we were used for their benefit. And unfortunately, even in the U.S., some politicians feel like their title makes them entitled. Right? Their title makes them entitled.
Yep.
So I got the title now, but I'm not working for the people. I'm working for myself. I got the title now, and maybe all the people won't generate wealth or build wealth, but guess what? I will. And so civility is, again, treating people the way you want to be treated, but also holding them to a standard. See, I was talking with some individuals, and they said, you know what? I don't want to vote again. I'm like, what? I don't want to vote again because when we vote, nothing happens. They promise us this, it doesn't happen, and things like that. And I believe them. I think that can happen anywhere in the world. But my answer was, first of all, civility is doing what you said you were going to do. And then the minute you know you can't do it, you have to let the people know. Right? So if you're 2 years in and you said you're going to build this road or build this school or put this water in and for any reason it's not happening, you have a responsibility to go back to the people that you talk to and say, hey, here's the problem I'm having. Here's the trouble I'm running into. Here's how I need you to help me accomplish this mission. That's a reason. We all understand reasons. But if you come back 4 years or 5 years later and say, vote for me again, it didn't get done and here's why, that's an excuse. We're not trying to hear an excuse at the end of the election cycle to vote again, but we will accept some reasons where we can actively participate. So I think what we have to do is say there's a consequence for not doing what we say we're going to do, but the consequence shouldn't be placed on the people. In other words, saying, I'm not going to vote. I think you should vote. You maybe should just vote for someone else that's going to do what they say they're going to do. People don't give you what you don't demand, what you don't ask for. You don't walk into a restaurant and they just bring you some food out. You have to order off the menu. And if you don't put civility on the menu, they're not going to serve it up. So the people decide how they're going to be talked to, how they're going to be communicated to. And if we don't make that decision, then they won't serve it.
Of the countries you visited on this continent, where have you felt that there is a great need or a greater need to actually imbue in the people and institutions that you work with this idea, this thinking about civility?
Well, that's a great question, but I don't think it's limited to this continent. I think civility is necessary on every continent, and I would use my own country as a kind of a example. You see, that for the first time in a long time, we had violence in the transition of power. We usually have a peaceful transition of power, and we try to hold ourselves as the standard. This is how you transition the power. But I think sometimes we get a little ego invested as American citizens, that we think everything's right and we don't have to work on it. What we did was we allowed incivility to come into the campaigns. Look at the way they talk to each other. Remember I said civility is attacking the problem but not attacking the person. Civility is making a point without making an enemy. And there was some in the past great examples of that. When Senator John McCain was running against Barack Obama for president, and the lady said, "Oh, he's terrible. He's a Muslim. He's this, he's that."
He said,
and he said, "No, he's not. No, he's a decent, hardworking American who I happen to disagree with. We don't have the same philosophies." So he's attacking the problems, but he's not attacking the person. And then it shut all of that down, right? But he could have fed into the flames. Now, what's funny is John McCain didn't win, but he did win in the eyes of the public. He's still quoted today. I'm quoting him right here now in Africa. We talk about his civility and the way he treated people and the way he ran a decent campaign, an honest campaign. It was fantastic. And I think those are the kind of things that we need to look out for. But in the U.S., when that didn't happen, then watch this. They incited the people, right? They said, hey, the election was stolen. The election, it was stolen. I didn't do an investigation. I let the courts do that, and they didn't come up with any evidence of it being stolen. But here's my question was, at the time, Joe Biden had no political position. How does the person with no political position steal the election? I mean, they're not over anything. They're not running anything. Like, I don't know how they do it. And how do they steal it in states that aren't democratic states? I don't know how they do it. But does it really matter? See, what's happened is we can let the people in authority become the truth, or we can let the truth be the authority. Now, when the people in the authority become the truth, then people take whatever they say as the truth. It was stolen? Okay, it was stolen. We have to do something, right? With no evidence, no facts, no research. They just believe them. And that's why it's important when you're in authority to understand that your words matter. They have consequences. And so you can't just randomly incite people for the sake of political gain. Because again, you may win, but the people may lose.
They may all lose. Let's take a break at this point. 27 minutes after 8. This is Kenya's biggest conversation, The Situation Room on SpiceFM. We're also live on KTN Home and live online with Dr. Ruben West. He is coordinating the Civility for Kenya campaign, talking about having civility as we have the campaigns pre, during, and post campaigns in the country. How can we get to that level? Dr. Ruben West talking about the Civility for Kenya campaign and talking about defining what civility is and how then we conduct our campaigns in a civil manner. Dr. West, all the things that you're saying, they basically are pointing towards having the right value system as a people, and also looking at one another and understanding who we are as a people. Now, you said you've attended some meetings that have been organized and conducted by the NCIC, the National Cohesion and Integration Commission. It was actually established so that they can address some of those things that you're saying, how we can be civil with one another. But they still face challenges at local community level and at national level. When you get to the national campaigns, we have issues. At community level, we have issues. And it's all about politicians taking advantage of a known narrative that was created many years ago about that other side, those other people. So you go to some parts of the country and there's already a conversation about, but those guys are taking up our lands. Those guys are doing our jobs. This is what we've been doing as a community. And yet those people are now invading into our areas. So it's going to be lost in all those things. How do we start fighting those many narratives that have been created over generations? People are born thinking that those people are bad.
First of all, it amazes me, and I'm not talking about anyone specifically, I'm talking in general, how people can be a Kenyan on one day and then a tribesman on the next day. Like for one, one day they're talking about the country, and then the next day, when it comes into political season, now they've made a tribal statement, and I get it. what they're doing is they're using what works. That's what works. But I think we have to teach civility. It's kind of like medicine. Sometimes you go to the ER, you need emergency treatment. But then there's also health and wellness. That's the ongoing treatment. That's eat right, vitamins, exercise, diet. So I think right now we better inject some civility. I told you I worked in surgery for 29 years. And one of the things we would do is before we started the procedure, we would inject local anesthetic. Now, we haven't made a cut yet, but we still injected local anesthetic because what they found is that if you numb the nerves before they were cut, it helps with post-op pain. If you give a preemptive antibiotic, a prophylactic antibiotic before the surgery starts, it helps with infection after the fact. What I know is that if we can inject civility into the campaign right now, right? I want to do a positive awareness campaign. Will it eliminate it? No, antibiotic doesn't eliminate all the infection, right? The local anesthetic doesn't eliminate all the pain. It just helps with it. But we need a long-term civic education program that trains on civility. I want to tell you guys something that's interesting. In the U.S., they say our divorce rate is 50%. That's high, isn't it?
Is it 50 really?
That's what they say, 50%. Now, listen to this. But everybody has premarital counseling. I don't know if they do that here, but before you want to get married, you go to your religious leader or whoever's going to marry you, and they give you premarital counseling. Let me tell you the problem, though. Premarital counseling cannot account for a bad choice. See, they already chose who they were going to marry. Like they've already picked the person. And now you're trying to counsel them when they're already in love. They needed the counseling before they ever started looking. Guess what? We need to be trained on civility before we ever start picking a leader so we know the things to look for. Unfortunately, we're trying to train them while they're already being talked to by these individuals. And so by creating a campaign right now, but also the civic education that trains on the standards of civility so that when election time comes, you already know what to look for. I can tell you in the U.S., there's a lot of people who mistook a life lesson for a life partner. You get what I'm saying? There's a lot of people who mistook a life lesson for a life partner. And that's what I hear people saying with the campaign. I voted for this, and I thought they were a leader, but they were a liar. Now, I'm not saying anyone's a liar. I can't say. But here's what I can say. We can judge them by the standards of civility. Do they do what they say? And then if they don't, that's your indication to choose someone different.
So how are you running this campaign in the country?
So we have it's a positive awareness campaign. We're teaming up with some organizations right now. We're going to launch it. We're going to do a full-on launch, but we want people to join in. You made a good point. The commission is doing work, but they can't do it by themselves. They're doing work, but at the national level, at the local level, there's still issues. That's why we need to get as many people involved as possible. I know that no country is perfect. There's no way to fight the storms of a country, but we can all use the same umbrella. We can all stand under the same covering. And so our goal is to get as many people in it as possible, especially the youth. When I talk to the youth.
So how do you do this? I mean, what's the structure of this campaign?
Fantastic. So to do it, especially targeting the youth, we have to use social media. Someone said, the youth nowadays are different. They're just different. And my answer is the youth are not different. Technology is. When I was a youth, I didn't have a way to get my narrative out to the world. I could tell my friends, but there was no online. There was no Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, none of those things. So I think to reach the youth, we have to find them where they're at. I was just watching a thing where they were having a summit on the youth, and they were telling what they need and what they wanted. And I was surprised that there was not one youth present. And so there's a difference between speaking to them or speaking with them. There's a difference between speaking for them or having them a part of the conversation. So my goal is to engage them in the conversation and allow them to participate as civility ambassadors for this civility movement.
Yeah. Dr. West, when you talk about civility, the training, the induction, the getting to understand, the exposure, is there a curriculum?
Yes. Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, there has to be a curriculum. And one of the things I want to do is, again, we have to do what we can right now because we need emergency medicine right now. The elections are coming. But then use the curriculum and have it vetted by the scholars here. And maybe it needs to be adjusted or changed, but then have the curriculum taught in schools. I've gotten a chance to go speak to organizations here. I was brought in by MP Shaw Hospital, Lions Hospital. I spoke at the Lions Club Festival. I've just different organizations. I told you I did corporate training and things like that. And so I understand the need for the narrative, the training. But I think what we have to do is infuse it into the system and help other people to understand it. Because one of the conundrums that people get into, and now let me just say in my country, I don't want to say here, but you have a lot of leaders, even at times religious leaders, that talk one way on Sunday, and then on Monday through Friday, they don't exactly practice what they preach. I'm not saying here, I'm saying in the U.S. And I still love the U.S. I'm just saying that.
Dr. West, let us say it for you. We are exactly the same.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm not going to say it. I'm not here to tear down. I'm here to build up. But my point is, but when the kids see that,
Yes.
and if their religious leader does it, or if their mother and father do it, then how could we expect the leaders of the country to do it? Because they've already seen it at home. Maybe we say this, my parents say this to me, and then they act another way. See, we teach what we know, but we reproduce who we are. And so you can't just say it and not deliver it. So in the end, the education that has to be put forth through civic education is critical because it has to be an ongoing process. We bring these narratives up at election time, but we don't teach math once every 4 or 5 years. We teach it ongoing. Civility has to be taught the same way.
So this curriculum you speak of, does it span a certain period of time? Is there a specific curriculum for a specific age group, a specific time? Does one graduate with a certificate and get to a diploma? Does one...
Yeah.
I mean, are the stages
exactly
in it?
What
yes.
Absolutely, there's stages. One of the great things about working with I-trained nations in the U.S. is they teach diplomacy, but they also teach civility. And they have a lot of civility practitioners. So some specialize in civility in the family, civility in religion, civility in the workplace, civility in politics. I don't try and do everything. What I do is borrow their knowledge, So I use some of their materials and say, okay, here's how we could do this. But also, it's not just bringing something in as if civility, Kenya can't manufacture its own information. What it is bringing it in and say, hey, is there anything in this that you could benefit from? Can you take anything out of this and put it in what you're doing already? Would any of this benefit you? And then how can we do it together? Here's what I know. And remember this, I don't know who it was that discovered water, but I'm sure it wasn't the fish. I'm sure it wasn't the fish, right? Right. Sometimes we have to, and what I'm saying is sometimes when we're so inundated, we don't notice what's going on right around us. So it helps when somebody injects something into our system. We're like, oh, I never thought about that, or I wasn't aware of that. So I want to help bring that injection. I'm not trying to tell them how to do it, but here's some ideas that I have, and how can we work together to do it together? The other thing is people have a way of ignoring. I brought a group of people here in July. We got in the cars, and they were scared. I mean, they were jumping and
What were they scared about?
oh my goodness, the traffic here. We've never seen cows in the road and goats in the road, and it's just different. And they said, Dr. West, we can't believe you're not scared. And I said, I'm not scared because I've been here for a while. Believe me, number one, I don't ride in the front. I just always ride in the back because I can't even look out the window. It's too much for me. But here's what happened to me. What you keep seeing, you quit seeing. And so because I had seen it so much, I didn't notice it. The same thing happens with in-civil treatment. When you see it so much, you don't notice it as something negative. It's just the way it is. But somebody looking from the outside saying, wait a minute, why are they talking like that? Why are they inciting the people like that? Why are they treating them like that? And so sometimes that outside voice can be beneficial.
So still, what I'm not getting is how exactly this campaign is running. So I get the concept, I get the idea, and it sounds very, very good. It sounds like, yes, this is something we should be having a conversation about, and we actually do have these conversations on a regular basis. But now here comes Dr. West, and there's a civility campaign in Kenya, and there's a positive awareness campaign, and there's I Teach Nations. How do all these things translate into this campaign? How will I interact and engage with the campaign?
Sure. So first of all, they can go to the website, civilityforkenya.org, civility, F-O-R, Kenya.org, civilityforkenya.org, and they can team up with us. We're working with other organizations, other institutions, for-profit, nonprofit organizations and companies that want to help sponsor the
So
campaign.
what kind of programs are you running?
So number one, for the positive awareness campaign, we want to have billboards, we want to have social media campaigns, we want to have road shows. All of those things are necessary. Right now we're building and aligning our partnerships, and then we're going to launch the campaign together. Okay. But all of those things are needed to get the narrative out, to get as many people on board as possible. My goal is not to speak to an audience. My goal is to speak to an army. Because the audience will listen, but an army will do something. And I want an army of people that want to promote civility. I want them to use the hashtag, support the campaign, wear the T-shirts, have the conversations, participate in our meetings, be a part of the road shows, bring other friends that they know that want civility into the conversation. So it's a full-on.
And then how do they influence change? The civility during the campaigns, we see the incitement by political leaders, incitement by community leaders. How do we then attack those?
So
or
the first
react
thing,
to those?
Yeah. You have to attack the problem, not the person, but the first thing we have to do is we have to react to it. I have a civility declaration that I'm going to ask all of the leaders to sign, the candidates to sign. And it's different than a peace proclamation. Number one, sometimes when you overuse a word, it doesn't mean anything. And I think peace is kind of tired because, you have the UN peacekeeping forces that'll come into countries with their guns. Keep the peace. Peace is not kept, it's created. It's created through civility. So, and I didn't create a proclamation because a proclamation is an announcement. Like we get married, we send out a wedding announcement. Hey, we're getting married. But it's a declaration. Our whole country is based on the Declaration of Independence. You declare something, and then as long as you act in accordance to what you declared, it changes the future. So our whole wedding system is based on a 2-word declaration. Do you take this person? I do. And do you? I do. So as long as they act in accordance to what they declared, it changes the future for the positive. But when they don't, it changes it for the negative. I want them to sign this Civility Declaration and then act in accordance to what they declared. But then when they don't, people can see that they're not doing it, and they can hold them accountable for it, or at least they can see what kind of person that they're dealing with, that they'll say one thing and then they'll do another.
Kenyan politicians will sign those things, bring them today.
Bring even 10 of them, they'll sign.
They will
10.
sign.
Yeah.
They've signed them before. They've signed, declarations for peace. I pledge to conduct my campaigns in a peaceful manner, in a certain manner. I pledge that once I get elected, I will serve the people. I pledge. They do that. They get into office. The first thing they do is swear. Holding the Bible.
Or the Quran.
Or the Quran.
Sure.
They do swear.
Yeah.
So holding them to accountable now, that's the other bit.
Then do they do what they said they were going to do?
No, they don't.
Then do they ever get elected again?
Yes.
Then that's not the politician's fault. You've trained them that they don't have to be responsible to what they say. See, they don't work for you don't work for them, they work for you.
So then possibly the people who need to sign these things are the citizens.
Yeah, well, we all have jobs, but we don't go out and sweep the parking lot if it's not our job, because it's not part of our job description.
Yep.
If you don't make it a requirement for them, why would they do it? As a matter of fact, you elected them when they didn't uphold the standards, so why would they change the standard?
And that's the point I'm trying to drive at, Dr. West, that for as long as you're the one who's giving the politician something to sign, the politician is going to sign it. Now, if the citizen, the voter, has not internalized this document, as long as the voter does not feel that this document belongs to them in any way,
right,
then holding them accountable doesn't apply.
Right, and they won't do it unless they've been trained on what civility means. So to have them sign a civility document and you don't know what it means, they can still do anything because you didn't know. That's why the civic education campaign has to go on at the same time as the positive awareness campaign. These things have to be integrated. It's an integrated system, and then it has to go on continually. Even after the campaign, it has to go on continually so that we start to understand these are the standards that we have to look for. Now, I'll be the first to say that, it's nothing's perfect, and that there is no 100% guarantee. Making an effort does not guarantee success, but not making one guarantees failure. And so my goal is just to make the effort, do it in conjunction with these other organizations, continue the education after the fact, see if we can get it integrated into the school system so that people better understand it, see if we could teach it in companies where we talk about civility in employment and all of these things, because once we understand it, we can create a new narrative and create a new future for the country. But if we don't do it, we'll find ourselves here again talking about it again.
Same thing.
And not only if we don't do it, because we'll do it. I believe in the Kenyan people. I believe in my people back home. It's not us that's doing it. We have to retrain the people what we'll accept as elected officials. And if we don't hold them to a standard, they already have one.
You know, there is the underlying assumption that we know how to hold leaders to account for the things that they are supposed to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And let me say this, CT, I don't make that assumption, but I understand that there is that. What my answer to that is, that's why we have to do the civic education.
Yes.
Because people don't know that they're liable to what they said. Like,
you see, apart from that, there is also a nascent understanding among our people that you don't really question leadership. Overtly, covertly, you don't question leadership, you accept. So, unless there's a component in this training that transforms the way people think completely, because it's in changing the way they think that we'll be able to impact on the way they behave.
of course.
You see,
Don't focus on behavior, focus on belief.
yes.
Yeah.
You see what Eric wasn't alluding to it. He was actually saying, he was stating a fact about the situation we have in this country. Just as you speak authoritatively about your country, we can speak authoritatively about our country.
Of course.
Those who are currently in leadership, specifically political leadership, that lot lost their way a long time ago. There is very little they can ever say that they will ever keep. They are huge, big, massive on promises. They make them every other day. And it is clear they have no intention whatsoever, beyond the perfunctory indication that they are trying to.
Yeah.
Beyond that, it's forgotten. And the next time they reappear, it's with new promises. It's just the norm. It isn't that we've given up. We're just stating the fact. Okay?
Yes.
Now, it isn't that Kenyans have given up. What Kenyans do, we find alternative ways of coping.
Yeah.
Since we know these fellows are going to lie to us, we figure, let them be. Let's figure out what we can do for ourselves. Now, in civility training, I would argue that Kenyans are already civil. You don't hear us insulting our leaders on a daily basis. But this civility isn't useful for us in this sense. Leaders are not held to account.
That's why I said it's campaign civility. So it's civility in every day, but also there has to be civility in the campaigns and in the leadership. So the training doesn't stop just at the people, it goes to the leadership. But I think over time, it's like they said that Kenya now has, I think, a plastic ban. They ban plastic.
Certain
things.
yes.
Certain plastic items.
Yes.
But that took a new way of thinking. That took a new way of behaving. That took a new way of living. It didn't have change happens over time, not overnight. And this will do the same. But we have to implement the change. We have to start the change. I do agree with you saying 100% that the majority of Kenyans are civil. And here's what inspires me. Man, I see everyday people doing projects, everyday people who started a home for these wayward children, or everyday people who are feeding or giving back. I think that's one of the things that COVID taught us, is that we can't just turn on each other. We have to turn to each other. How can we help one another? Now, when they're inspired in such a way, we have to use that momentum, because they've gotten used to helping one another. I mean, people were in dire straits during that time, and some still are. But you see everyday citizens stepping up to help, not because they're from the same tribe or not because they're from the same religion, but because they're Kenyan. We have to use that as the model, as the standard. And then the other thing is, we have to start training them that there is an accountability that people have when they take a leadership role. They're accountable. And if we don't teach them to be accountable, then they're not going to be accountable. And I love what you said, in that a lot of people are taught not to question authority. And I think the thing we have to teach them is not to question authority unless they're being incivil, unless they're doing harm, unless they're causing problems. Because questioning it is not going against it. It's making them account for what they're doing. And if we don't do it, we're going to keep getting more of the same. That's why, like now, back in the U.S., it's like we can't let that happen again. Like, what happened? And we have civility organizations that are supposed to govern politics, but they fell asleep at the wheel because it was going on autopilot. Now we see we have to come back afresh and anew and do that emergency injection again.
Okay. So once again, how do people participate and get to take part in this?
Fantastic. They can go to www.civilityforkenya.org. That's civilityforkenya.org, civility, Kenya.org. And they can reach out to us. We're going to be organizing meetings. There's organizations that may want to team up with us. We'll certainly set up meetings. Companies that want to partner with us will certainly do that. But I think we'll make a good impact.
Final and very important question.
Yes,
so
sir.
who's financing you?
It's multifunctional. There's some individual groups that are financing us. There's individuals that are financing us. There's people that have just decided to put in funds to finance us. The point is, everyone can participate. Who should want to participate? Anyone who feels like civility is a key component to what we need to help generate and deliver a peaceful campaign in post-election society.
All right. We've been having a conversation with Dr. Ruben West. He is running the Civility for Kenya campaign and saying, looking for partnerships, going to be launching this campaign shortly.